There are spotless homes where peace can't be felt, places where everything seems in order, yet the air feels heavy, and something inside feels old, saturated, frozen in time. It's not always dust that steals our calm. Sometimes it's the objects that hold unspoken stories, the corners filled with things that no longer represent who we are. We live surrounded by small accumulations that seem harmless, but hide fear of letting go, guilt for moving on, and attachment to old versions of ourselves. That physical house, overflowing with just-in-case items, often mirrors the inner house that's also begging for cleansing. We all go through stages where letting go feels hard. We keep clothes we no longer wear, papers from years ago, gifts that hurt just by being there. We do it believing that keeping is protecting, without realizing that keeping can also mean holding on to pain. When a house fills up with things that serve no purpose, the mind becomes a warehouse of to-dos, guilt, and unresolved emotions. But there's a simple truth that Stoicism teaches. Nothing you own truly belongs to you if you can't let it go without losing yourself. This video isn't just about tidying up a room, it's about clearing the soul to regain lightness and focus. If this is your first time here, my name is Gabriel, and I share reflections on how to protect your peace and dignity, even when others don't change. Here you'll find practical insights inspired by Stoicism and everyday life to face grief, difficult relationships, or stages of reinvention with serenity. I invite you to subscribe and join me on this journey, because by the end of this video, I'll share a lesson that could forever change the way you see your home and your mind. Let's begin. Every object holds a story, but some turn into chains. We keep letters, photos, ornaments, or furniture that no longer fit, as if they were essential pieces of our identity. Without realizing it, we live inside a museum of the past, where every corner reminds us of something we no longer are. We do it out of fear of forgetting, or because letting go feels like a betrayal to who we once were, or to the person who gave us that object. But holding on to what hurts is also a choice, and the weight of those objects doesn't lie in their physical mass, but in what they force us to relive every time we look at them. By now, we've understood that clutter isn't always visible. It often disguises itself as affection or memory. However, Stoic wisdom teaches that clinging to what has already completed its cycle is resisting the natural flow of life. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our opinion of them." When we give eternal value to what once was, we deny ourselves the chance to experience what is. The past deserves to rest, and we have the duty to keep moving forward. How many times have you looked at an object and felt a knot in your chest? That knot doesn't belong to the object. It belongs to the emotion you haven't yet allowed yourself to release. A story once taught me this clearly. Years ago, I kept an old mug that had belonged to someone no longer in my life. I didn't use it, yet I couldn't throw it away. I told myself it was just a keepsake, though every time I saw it, I relived the pain of that goodbye. One day it fell and broke on its own. At first I felt anger, then an odd sense of relief. I realized I hadn't lost anything. I had been freed from something that had silently held me back. It wasn't the mug that broke, it was the attachment. The home becomes a mirror of the soul. When every object carries an unresolved story, the space grows heavy. Cleaning isn't always about moving things. It's about facing yourself, deciding which parts of the past are still alive and which ones need to rest. And in that process, freedom appears, the kind that comes when you can look around and feel that nothing owns you. Letting go isn't forgetting. It's allowing what was lived to take its natural place. Memory, not routine. Releasing doesn't erase what we love. It simply returns it to the flow of time where it belongs. That's how a house stops being a capsule of the past and becomes a space where life can move freely again. With that said, let's turn to another kind of weight that hides quietly in our closets. The clothes that no longer reflect who we are today, yet we keep as if identity never changed. Some clothes don't dress the body, they dress nostalgia. Pieces we no longer wear but keep hanging as symbols of who we once were or who we thought we'd become. A dress from 20 years ago, a shirt that belonged to a season of success or love, a pair of jeans that might fit again someday. The truth is, when we hold on to them, we're not just keeping fabric, we're keeping expectations. And every time we look at them, we remind ourselves of what we no longer are, or what we haven't yet accepted has changed. We've already seen how objects can tie us to the past, but when that weight hangs in our closet, the trap becomes more intimate. Stoicism teaches that life is change, and the body is part of the natural flow of time. Resisting that change is like trying to stop a stream of water with your hands. Marcus Aurelius wrote that, "Change is the delight of nature, and if nature transforms, why should we remain the same?" Dressing in yesterday's clothes is, in a way, denying ourselves the joy of celebrating who we are today. I remember one afternoon when a friend asked me to help her organize her wardrobe. She cried as she let go of the wedding dress she hadn't worn in over a decade. She had kept it out of respect for the past, but every time she saw it, she relived a pain she claimed to have healed. When she finally donated it, she breathed differently. I realized then that the act wasn't one of loss, but of recognition. Letting go of who we no longer are is also a form of self-love. The wardrobe becomes a silent mirror of the soul. When we open it, we can see whether we're living in acceptance or in resistance. The clothes we don't wear, the ones we keep just in case, speak of insecurities we haven't yet faced. The ones we do wear reflect what we've learned to value: comfort, authenticity, coherence with the stage of life we're in. Letting go of a piece of clothing can be as powerful as closing an emotional chapter. There's something deeply freeing about wearing only what truly represents us. It's not about fashion or appearance, it's about identity. Clothing is the skin we choose to show the world, and if that skin doesn't align with our current truth, something inside us tightens every time we touch it. Freeing up physical space becomes then an act of respect for the person we are today. Getting rid of clothes that no longer fit isn't a trivial gesture. It's an acknowledgement that the body changes, that life moves forward, and that every stage has its own beauty. When we do this, the closet becomes a sacred space, a place where only what accompanies us in the present remains. And from that clarity, we can now face another kind of accumulation, one subtler and more deceptive. The just-in-case clutter hiding among papers, folders, and drawers we never open. Hidden among drawers, folders, and old envelopes lies a very common form of anxiety, the need to keep things just in case. We hold on to bills from years ago, expired warranties, manuals for appliances that no longer exist, and piles of papers we think are important but never look at again. Each sheet represents a small, unfinished debt, a silent reminder that we still don't fully trust life. We cling to paper like someone clutching a life preserver on dry land, believing that without it, we might lose control. We've already seen how objects and clothes can tie us to the past, but the accumulation of papers reveals something deeper: fear of inner disorder. Just in case is fear's favorite phrase. Under its excuse, we fill every corner of our homes and our minds with unnecessary weight. Yet the Stoics taught that true security isn't about having everything within reach, but about knowing how to adapt to whatever comes. Epictetus reminded us that only those who don't fear losing anything essential are truly free. And really, what essential value lies in a stack of yellowed receipts? A few years ago, I helped a relative organize their desk. We found folders full of papers that made no sense to keep. When they finally dared to throw them out, they did it with a mix of guilt and relief. They said something I've never forgotten. It feels like by letting this go, my mind is getting organized too. And they were right. External order reflects internal order. Every unnecessary document is an unresolved thought, a worry disguised as precaution. Keeping what's useless feeds the illusion of control. We think that holding on to everything will protect us from mistakes, but in truth, all we're doing is giving more space to distrust. Stoicism invites us to trust our ability to respond to the unexpected, not the amount of stuff we store. Letting go of useless papers is a practice of rational faith, trusting that we'll know how to handle what comes without depending on piles of paper that only take up space. And when those drawers finally get cleared out, something remarkable happens. Silence returns. The mind breathes. The just-in-case dissolves, and a calm sense of sufficiency appears to have less and yet feel more whole. It's as if every sheet that leaves the house takes a repetitive thought with it. Maybe that's when we realize we don't need to accumulate proof of what has already passed, because what we've lived and learned is already within us. I invite everyone listening to do something simple. Open that drawer you haven't touched in years and decide what truly deserves to stay. It's not about throwing things away for the sake of it. It's about choosing consciously. Each paper that goes is a small act of trust in the present, a quiet declaration of freedom. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe, like, and share your name and country in the comments below. I read them all, and it always brings me joy to see how far this community reaches around the world. You can also share what object or kind of clutter you're ready to let go of. Your words might inspire someone else. That said, let's return to our theme. Because behind the just-in-case lies another, subtler form of emotional attachment. The gifts we keep out of guilt, even when deep down they no longer do us any good. Some objects aren't bought, they're inherited with an uncomfortable emotion. Gifts we didn't choose, perhaps never even liked, but feel we must keep so as not to hurt the giver. Behind them lies one of the most common traps of attachment, mistaking gratitude for obligation. We hold on to things that don't represent us, just to sustain relationships that no longer exist or that stopped being healthy long ago. Each time we look at them, something in our chest tightens, as if the object itself reminded us of an emotional debt. We've already understood that accumulation often comes from fear. In this case, fear disguises itself as politeness or affection. We believe that letting go of a gift is disrespectful, when in reality, keeping it often betrays our own peace. Seneca said that nothing that weighs on you can be considered a true good. If an object makes you feel guilt or discomfort, it's no longer serving its original purpose, to be a gesture of love or appreciation. Anything given should bring joy, not chains. I remember a woman who kept a huge painting, a gift from her ex-husband. It hung in her living room, but she never looked at it with pleasure. She kept it there out of respect for the past. One day, while painting the wall, she decided to take it down and replace it with a photograph of a landscape she loved. She later told me that for the first time in years, her home truly felt like hers. She hadn't destroyed a memory, she had reclaimed a space. And deep down, that simple gesture was her way of reconciling with herself. Gifts that carry guilt are often witnesses of relationships where setting boundaries was difficult. They're material reminders of what we gave without receiving, of what we tolerated in the name of affection. Keeping them alive means keeping the dynamic of obligation alive, even when no one is left to demand it. Letting them go, on the other hand, is a declaration that love doesn't need material witnesses to remain worthy. Stoicism teaches that the value of an action doesn't lie in how others perceive it, but in the intention behind it. Accepting a gift freely, rather than out of obligation, gives us back the power to decide what enters and stays in our lives. Because even gifts must pass the same filter as everything around us. Does this bring me peace, or does it take it away? When a gift loses its positive meaning, keeping it only perpetuates an emotion that has already fulfilled its role. Letting it go doesn't mean erasing the person, it means being thankful for what was and allowing the gesture to become a memory, not a burden. That way, the space it once occupied transforms into room for what you truly want to accompany you. Freeing your home from these objects is also freeing your mind from inherited guilt. And from that lightness, the house begins to speak a different language, one where beauty and serenity take the lead. With that in mind, let's open another door, the one to those objects that, though decorative, no longer inspire us and only fill our spaces with empty presence. There are homes that look perfect but don't feel alive. They're filled with ornaments, paintings, artificial flowers, and colors chosen out of habit or trend, not love. Behind those soulless decorations hides an unconscious search, the need to appear harmonious when, deep down, what's really felt is emptiness. Every object placed without purpose is like a meaningless word in a conversation with our own home. We surround ourselves with apparent beauty, but without realizing it, that emotionless aesthetic ends up suffocating authenticity. After reflecting on gifts that carry guilt, we can see that there are also things that remain in our space just to fill silence. The Stoics spoke about the value of simplicity, of living with what's necessary and not confusing abundance with fulfillment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If we apply that to the home, we could say that our space becomes colored by the quality of the objects we choose to keep. And if those objects don't bring us serenity or joy, their presence becomes visual noise that disrupts inner calm. I remember once walking into a perfectly tidy house where nothing seemed to have a story. Every corner was decorated, but there wasn't a single trace of real life. No photos, no books, no human warmth. It was beautiful and cold like a museum. I realized then that excessive perfection can be another form of fear. Fear of being seen, fear of imperfection, fear of showing what's real. Authenticity, on the other hand, makes even the simplest corner feel warm, because there's life there. The soul of a home isn't measured by the price of its objects, but by the harmony between what it shows and what its inhabitant feels. When we decorate with intention, every element becomes an extension of our identity and purpose. But when we fill spaces just to fill them, what we're really doing is distracting ourselves from what we don't want to face. That visual saturation can turn emotional. The environment speaks faster than the mind and whispers, "There's too much of everything here, but too little of you." A good question to pause and ask ourselves is, does this decoration represent me, or does it cover me? If every ornament, painting, or color connects meaningfully to your story, then it has soul. If not, it's just filler. The Stoics valued clarity over excess. Our homes should reflect that same philosophy. Leaving empty space isn't neglect, it's wisdom. In the stillness of a clear, open space, the mind rests and the emotions breathe. The practice of removing decorations without soul isn't about extreme minimalism, it's about authenticity. It's about consciously choosing for your surroundings to inspire you rather than exhaust you. Every object should serve a purpose, to be useful, to bring joy, or to remind you of something noble. If it fulfills none of these, it's time for it to go. And when you finally achieve that, something transformative happens. Every room becomes an extension of your inner peace. With that in mind, let's move toward a more tangible reflection where detachment becomes even more visible. Let's talk about the things that break and stay, the broken items that linger as if waiting for a second chance that never comes. There's a strange habit many of us share, keeping things at home that no longer work, a fan that stopped spinning, a lamp that won't turn on, a clock that froze years ago. We tell ourselves we'll fix them someday, but that day never comes. Meanwhile, those objects sit there, still and silent, as symbols of our struggle to accept that something has ended. What's broken isn't just material, it's also a metaphor for what we find hard to say goodbye to. After seeing how empty decoration reflects an inner emptiness, it's easy to understand that a broken device holds a similar lesson. Deep down, keeping it is a form of denial. The Stoics spoke of accepting the nature of things, of recognizing the cycle of birth and end without resistance. When an object stops working, its purpose has been fulfilled, and clinging to it is like asking time to go backward. Seneca wrote that nothing perishes, it only transforms. Wisdom lies in allowing that transformation, not in holding on to what has already served its purpose. I remember an old radio I kept on my desk for years. It didn't work, but it reminded me of my father. Every time I looked at it, I felt a mix of affection and sadness. One day, I decided to let it go. It wasn't easy, but when I did, I realized something. The memory wasn't in the radio, it was in me. What connected me to my father wasn't the object, but the experience we shared. I understood then that keeping broken things isn't a tribute, it's fear. Fear of forgetting, fear of losing the physical trace of what we love. Broken devices also represent what we postpone. We say, "I'll fix it someday," but that someday becomes a constant reminder of what we haven't done. Each time we see it, our mind feels a small sting of guilt. The home, then, turns into a space full of unfinished tasks. Repairing or releasing are the only healthy options. Keeping what's useless only extends the feeling of stagnation. The home, like the mind, needs functionality. It's not about having everything new, it's about ensuring that what stays has a clear purpose. A useless object drains both visual and emotional energy. It's there, but it gives nothing back. In Stoic terms, this goes against the principle of living according to nature. What no longer fulfills its function must be transformed or released. Letting go of what's broken can be an act of reconciliation with impermanence. It reminds us that nothing, not even ourselves, is exempt from wear, and that accepting that wear is embracing life as it is. There's beauty in what works, but also in what we let go of with gratitude. True emotional maturity lies in knowing when something deserves repair and when it deserves rest. With this clarity, the path of detachment becomes more tangible. Now that we've learned to let go of what no longer serves its purpose, it's time to look at another kind of clutter, one subtler and sometimes more dangerous. The kind hiding in the pantry, the medicine cabinet, or the bathroom, among expired products and medicines that reveal a lot about how we care for ourselves. We all have that drawer or shelf filled with expired products, from forgotten medicines to creams we never used. The strange thing about this kind of clutter is that it's not just about objects, but about a mindset. Believing we'll be better prepared for uncertainty if we accumulate more than we need. Instead of living with what's essential, we make sure to have just-in-case items that never end up serving any purpose. The presence of those expired products isn't just a matter of disorganization, it's a reflection of our relationship with scarcity and our fear of the future. Up to this point, we've seen that the accumulation of objects reveals how we relate to the past and the present. But holding on to what's expired signals that we're not living fully in the now. We cling to the idea that we might need it someday, even though we know that what has expired is no longer of any use. Stoicism invites us to focus on what's within our reach today, not on what might or might not be useful in the future. Life isn't found in what we keep, it's in what we truly need to live in the present. I remember cleaning my bathroom some time ago and finding a box of medicine long past its expiration date. What struck me wasn't just how much time had passed without ever needing it, but how I felt seeing that box, as if I'd been holding on to an expectation of illness that never came. It was as if fear of lack had led me to accumulate excessively, not realizing that what I was keeping was only an illusion. Throwing those boxes away was liberating. It was a small act of release, a reminder that I don't have to live in anticipation of what hasn't yet arrived. Just like with the other objects we've mentioned, keeping expired items reveals a deeper fear of scarcity. We believe that having something just in case gives us safety, but in truth, that mindset makes us cling to what no longer serves us. Instead of living with what we truly need, we create spaces filled with useless potential, constant reminders that we're not fully trusting the present moment. As Epictetus said, freedom does not depend on what you possess, but on what you are able to let go of. Self-care reflects our attitude toward life itself. If we hold on to expired products, maybe we're neglecting our own mental well-being. Just as we throw away medicines that have lost their value, we must also let go of thoughts and habits that keep us stuck in the past or trapped in an uncertain future. To live stoically is to free ourselves from unnecessary excess and focus only on what we truly need to be well. When we clear out expired items from the medicine cabinet, we're not just tidying a physical space. We're becoming aware of what we genuinely need to take care of ourselves, both physically and mentally. Letting go of what's unnecessary, of what no longer serves a purpose, is an act of self-care, because only what's essential deserves to remain. And when the essential is in its rightful place, it creates room for peace and calm. Through this simple act of removing what's old and unnecessary, we prepare to face another kind of belonging, one that may not be expired, but still binds us to something that no longer is. Let's talk now about the things that belong to those who are no longer with us, yet we still hold on to. Every corner of a home holds its own story, but some stories aren't meant to stay there forever. Often, we keep objects that once belonged to people who are no longer with us: watches, jewelry, letters, mementos from moments that have already passed. These objects are witnesses to a stage of life that, while precious, now belongs to the past. Keeping them isn't always an act of love. It can also be an act of attachment. We hold on to them as if their presence could keep the connection alive. But what we're really doing is preventing ourselves from letting go, refusing to move forward. By now, we've seen how every object can reflect our struggle with release. The Stoics teach that attachment to things not only limits our freedom, but also blinds us to the value of the present. Marcus Aurelius said, "Death is the natural rest of life." When we cling to what's no longer here, we don't allow those memories to rest. We create a space filled with absences. The presence of such objects often speaks of a lack of acceptance, an attempt to defy what is inevitable. I remember a friend who kept her late mother's letters and photos tucked away in a drawer. She said she wanted them there as a tribute, yet every time she opened that drawer, the pain returned. One day, she decided to take the letters out and read them. She cried, but through those tears, she felt something inside her loosen. It wasn't about loving her mother any less. It was about honoring her in a new way. When she placed those letters in a box she no longer planned to open, she gave herself permission to move forward, with love intact, but with renewed peace. Keeping things that belong to those who have passed isn't always about nostalgia or grief. It's often about our struggle to accept death as a natural part of life. The objects that stay with us may be anchored in the past, but what we truly need is to open ourselves to what's ahead. Memories are everlasting, but objects are just material fragments of what we lived. Letting go of the physical doesn't mean forgetting what was. It means honoring life's process for what it truly is, finite and beautiful. Stoicism reminds us that nothing lasts forever, not even our possessions. Life flows. Everything has a beginning and an end. Detachment isn't an act of forgetting, it's an act of recognition. By releasing these objects, we silently acknowledge the value of what was lived, while allowing it to rest in its natural place. Memory. When we let go of these belongings, we free not only physical space in our homes, but also emotional space within ourselves. Each thing we release brings us closer to a present filled with freedom and possibility. It allows us to live without the shadows of what can no longer be changed. And as with everything else, once we release what no longer serves us, we can see clearly what truly deserves to stay. Now let's turn to another kind of accumulation, subtler, but just as heavy, the weight of unfinished projects. Do you have an unfinished craft at home, a toolbox stored away with a half-done project, or a half-written idea sitting on your desk? The accumulation of unfinished projects is one of the most insidious kinds of clutter, not always physical, yet deeply emotional. Each incomplete project is a closed door left open in our minds, a broken promise that constantly reminds us of what we haven't finished. And though it may seem harmless, that constant to-do drains our energy, keeps us distracted, and often fills us with guilt for not having completed it. The curious thing about unfinished projects is that they don't just take up physical space, they occupy emotional space too. Stoicism teaches that the true purpose of life is to live in alignment with what truly matters. If a project no longer moves us, if we left it halfway, because deep down we know it's no longer part of our priorities, keeping it open only prevents us from focusing on what we can genuinely accomplish. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." And if we allow those pending tasks to pile up, we're mismanaging our energy and attention. Once, while cleaning my office, I found an old notebook full of notes for a book I never wrote. I had started it with great enthusiasm, but abandoned it years ago. Looking at it, I felt a mix of regret and relief. For years, that notebook held a symbolic place in my life, an idea that never materialized. In that moment, I realized it wasn't about the pages or the ideas, but about a phase that no longer represented me. I threw those pages away and felt as if I had freed up mental space that had long been occupied by an unkept promise. Unfinished projects, though not always visible, are ever present in our emotional landscape. Every time we see something half done, our mind registers it as pending, and that distracts us. Letting go of these projects, or completing them if they truly align with our path, is a way of bringing order to our minds. When we free ourselves from loose ends, from threads that tie us to what no longer matters, we prepare ourselves for a clearer, more focused, and more peaceful future. Just like with physical objects, letting go of unfinished projects is an act of self-care. It's not about avoiding productivity, it's about being honest with ourselves about what we truly want to finish. The key is to discern. Does this project still matter to me? Or is it only taking up space because it once represented what could have been? Taking the time to either finish what truly matters or release what no longer belongs in our lives is a powerful practice. When we do this, we free not only physical space, but also mental energy, allowing new possibilities to emerge. And now that we've seen how our surroundings fill up with what we no longer need, it's time to look at another kind of clutter, those cables, gadgets, and pieces of technology we never use, yet keep around as if they might be useful someday. In the digital age, we're surrounded by devices and cables that, instead of simplifying our lives, often complicate them. Old phone chargers, tangled headphone cords we no longer use, adapters that never seem to fit anywhere, and electronic gadgets we keep just in case we might need them someday. All these objects have one thing in common: their unfulfilled promises of usefulness. But beyond that, they reveal something deeply human, our tendency to hold on to things we believe might one day be useful, without realizing they're only taking up space and energy, both physical and emotional. Up to this point, we've seen how accumulation often speaks of fear and attachment to the past. The buildup of unnecessary technology, however, often reflects a different anxiety: fear of obsolescence and unease about the future. We live with the idea that we must always be prepared, that every gadget or cable could serve a future purpose. Yet the Stoics taught that true preparedness doesn't come from hoarding just in case, but from adapting gracefully to whatever life brings. As Seneca said, luck favors the prepared, not the hoarder. Once, while reorganizing my workspace, I came across a box full of old cables and devices. Most of them I couldn't even identify. Who hasn't had that mysterious drawer full of cables with unknown origins or forgotten purposes? What struck me was that every time I opened that box, I felt a subtle weight on my mind. Those cables clearly had no place in my present life, yet my mind clung to the thought that maybe, just maybe, they could be useful one day. Emptying that box was liberating, as if I'd cleared my mental space of all those possibilities that existed only in my imagination. The home, much like the mind, needs order to function well. Forgotten cables and outdated gadgets are a reflection of how easily we allow the unnecessary to accumulate in our lives. These items invite us to reflect on what we truly need to live efficiently and reveal how attachment to material things can quietly overload our existence. By letting go of what we don't use, we become lighter, more focused on what truly matters, and more capable of facing the future with adaptability. Letting go of unused technology is, in truth, a metaphor for how we cling to expectations and fears about what the future might bring. Creating space isn't just a physical act, it's an act of trust that what we need will appear when the time is right. Living with less allows us to be more agile, more present, and less anxious about what might be missing. By freeing our homes from all those forgotten cables and unused devices, we create a space where the present takes center stage. What remains in our home truly serves a purpose, and what no longer belongs makes room for what's new and genuinely necessary. Now that we've cleared away physical clutter, we arrive at the final and most important layer of transformation: the thoughts that clutter our inner home. Throughout this journey, we've talked about freeing our physical home from everything that no longer holds value or purpose. But there's something even deeper we must address: the thoughts and beliefs that clutter our inner home. The mind, just like the house, can gather dust, emotional weight that serves no purpose, painful memories, or worries that only drain our energy. These thoughts, though invisible, are what truly determine how we feel and how we live each day. Just as we need to clean our house so that the air can flow freely, we also need to cleanse our mind so we can live with peace and clarity. Stoicism invites us to observe our thoughts and emotions with distance, to stop identifying with them. Seneca said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that determines your peace." The thoughts that drag us into the past, the fears that anticipate the future, or the worries about what we can't control are like old, broken objects in our minds. They take up space, but add no value. It's essential to understand that while we can't control every thought that enters our mind, we can choose what to do with them. Some time ago, while meditating, I realized how cluttered my inner world had become. I kept thinking about unfinished things, unsaid words, the what-ifs that never happened. My mind felt full of disordered boxes, of invisible objects blocking me from seeing what truly mattered. In that moment, I understood that just as I do with physical things, I also needed to learn to let go of those thoughts. It wasn't about ignoring them. It was about allowing them to pass without holding on. Peace begins when we understand that not every thought deserves to be fed. The mind, like the home, needs order to function properly. When we fill it with useless or harmful thoughts, we end up living in inner chaos that prevents us from acting clearly. Mental detachment is one of the most powerful practices we can bring into our lives. It helps us release what no longer serves us: resentments, guilt, unfounded worries, unnecessary judgments. By doing so, we make room for new thoughts, for those that genuinely bring well-being and serenity. Just as organizing a house allows us to live in it more peacefully, cleansing our mind allows us to live with greater purpose and calm. It's a daily practice, a constant reminder that what doesn't serve us must be released, and that our inner peace depends on our ability to let go of what we cannot change. True freedom begins when we realize we don't have to live under the weight of thoughts that don't contribute to our happiness. When we free ourselves from the thoughts that clutter our inner home, we create a space where serenity can enter. This process of cleansing, both internal and external, is the path toward a lighter, fuller life, one more connected to what truly matters. With that said, I deeply thank you for accompanying me on this journey. Now, as you release everything unnecessary, I invite you to reflect on your own home and your own mind. Make them a place where peace and purpose can flourish, because only when we achieve both outer and inner clarity can we truly live in fullness. Throughout this journey, we've discovered that the order in our home doesn't depend only on what we keep, but also on what we choose to let go of. The objects, memories, projects, and of course, the thoughts that accompany us all have an impact on our inner peace. Letting go of what's unnecessary, of what no longer serves us, isn't just a matter of physical tidiness. It's an opportunity to transform our lives by freeing ourselves from the weight of what we haven't yet released. Today, I invite you to reflect. What could you let go of in your home that's keeping you from moving forward? What thoughts are cluttering your inner house, circling around with no real purpose? Peace doesn't arrive by magic. It's the result of consciously clearing away what distracts us from living in the present. As we empty our homes of what's superfluous, we can also clear our minds of what doesn't bring us clarity. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Your presence here, your willingness to open yourself to new ways of thinking and living, is what makes it possible for this channel to keep sharing wisdom and reflection. I'm deeply grateful for your time, your thoughts, and your openness. Know that this space will always be a place where peace and personal growth are valued. Remember, when you let go of what's unnecessary, you create space not only in your home, but in your life. No matter what stage of life you're in, it's always possible to begin again, to live with greater clarity and serenity. I invite you to share this video with someone who might benefit from this reflection, so together we can build an environment of peace and dignity. Share in the comments where you're watching from and which of these lessons resonated most with you. I always read your messages, and I'd love to know how you're applying these ideas in your own life. Don't forget to subscribe, give a like, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Up next, you'll see 2 videos that explore similar topics. Choose the one that speaks to you most and keep walking this path of practical wisdom. Thank you truly. And as always, I hope you continue to find your way toward a life that's calmer, fuller, and wiser. See you in the next video.